Good morning, church. It's great to be before you again, and I know it's not in our auditorium, but we will be back together soon. For those who are visiting us for the first time, or if you're back with us, we welcome you to the Ripon Church of Christ, and we hope that the sermon, the lesson this morning will be edifying to you. You could reach us in a number of ways. You could give me a call, and we'd love to assist you. Imagine hearing these words. You haven't been feeling well, and you went to your doctor, and you had some tests run, and the doctor calls you, and he has you come in, and he gives you some pretty devastating news. He tells you that you have a disease, and if you do not seek a doctor and a cure, that you will die from this disease. Well, you are referred to a specialist, and this specialist has the only cure for your disease. And he has a procedure that he has you go through, and he has this drug, and if you take this, you will be cured. Your disease will go into remission. Now, would you go to him, or would you ignore this doctor? Would you just go about your life hoping that you will get better? I do not believe anybody in their right mind would not go seek out this doctor for his procedure, for his treatment, for them to be cured of this terrible disease. See, all we have been hearing lately is about COVID-19, this coronavirus. I'm not going to go a lot in today about this virus, but it is relevant. It is relevant in the illustrations that we're going to draw from it and what we're going to be talking about this morning. What I want to talk about to you today is another pandemic that we face in this world. See, this is the most deadly and destructive disease, so to speak, that the world has ever seen, that ever will see. But it's not being taken seriously. The doctor who has the procedure and the medicine to put this disease into remission is also ignored. He's not taken seriously by those out there. In fact, it is ignored by billions of people. See, if you want to be made well, you must seek out the cure from the one who will make you well. That is not my opinion. See, that is fact. Those who get infected by the COVID-19, they need to seek medical attention. See, they need to see a doctor. They have to go to a hospital. They have to get the treatment that they need. They have to be on the ventilators for their lungs. If they don't, they may die. A lot of them do die. Today we're going to look at part one of Do You Want to Be Made Well? Now, if you want to be made well, first of all, there's got to be a diagnosis, right? We have to know the cancer. We have to know the disease. We must identify what the global pandemic is, what makes us sick, what I have been exposed to. Secondly, we must know the cause. How do we become infected with this disease? And then third, what happens if we do not seek the cure? And then fourth, we must know what the cure is. Who or what do we need to seek out to make us well? See, once we know, we must seek that treatment. We must seek out the cure for the disease that we have. See, the global pandemic we're talking about is a spiritual one. This is the one that the world is not in panic about. See, this is the soul disease of sin. See, in order to be made well, we must first look into some facts about sin. Sin is a spiritual cancer, so to speak. When we look at the COVID-19 comes from Wuhan, China. The very C in the name determines that, right? And it is said that it came from a bat, from somebody eating a uncooked bat. See, it's a delicacy in China to eat these bats, and someone got infected with this virus, and then they brought it to other people. Then it spread around through this city in China, Wuhan, China. See, and the virus does not stay in one area, and this virus does not discriminate. It will infect anyone it can reach. See, it is serious, and it does kill. However, it can be treated, and they are saying for right now, so far, it has a 90% cure rate. It has been called the silent enemy, and we are facing a physical enemy here in the world, one in which we cannot see, and one which we do not know where it is, but it is spreading. So let's look at the diagnosis. What is this cancer that we're talking about? What is sin? See, most of the world does not know what sin is. Sin comes from the devil. See, he is the silent enemy that roams this earth looking for whoever he may infect with sin. But see, sin is much more destructive. Sin is much more deadly than COVID-19 or anything else we see. Any deadly disease that we know of, sin is more deadly than any disease. Because sin not only infects us or hurts us physically, it also does spiritually. It causes man to be separated from God, in which we will experience spiritual death. The definition is from a word that we get, and it's a shooting word, hamartia. And basically the idea is there's a target, and you miss that target. You miss the mark. See, God is that target, and we miss God. But really, if you think about it, your aim's not really at God if you're going to miss God. We are going to hit our target if we really, really strive to seek Him out and to serve Him. There's synonyms for sin in dictionary.com. Listen closely to this list. Crime, error, evil, fault, guilt, immorality, lust, misdeed, offense, shortcoming, transgression, violation, wrong, wrongdoing, anger, covetousness, damnation, debt, deficiency, demerit, disobedience, envy, gluttony, imperfection, iniquity, pride, trespass, ungodliness, unrighteousness, vice, wickedness, wrongness, evil doing. Wow. Look at that list. The Bible defines sin as breaking God's law. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, everyone who practices sin practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. Sin is whatever is not of faith. Romans chapter 14, verse 23. Sin is all unrighteousness. See, the Bible tells us that in 1 John chapter 5, verse 1, all unrighteousness is sin. So what does sin do to us? Well, when we look at what we're facing today, this COVID-19, they say there's the symptoms of severe sore throat and headaches and body aches and fever. And it causes those who are infected with it to have a very difficulty in breathing. And that is causing death in many. Well, let's look at sin. First of all, sin destroys the mind's sense of perception. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, tells us that it sears the conscience like a hot iron. Well, how is that? Well, Hosea 4, chapter 6 tells us how. Hosea says, my people, speaking of God, he says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. See, when we have the knowledge of worldly wisdom and not of God, we cannot obey God's commandments. See, because we do not know them. And if we do not know them, how are we going to abide by them? How are we going to obey them? We're not going to. We're going to sin because we do not know any better. See, eventually we're going to believe our own lies and we're going to sin and we're going to believe that it's perfectly okay to do what we're doing. A thorough study of the scriptures will show us God's way. It's going to keep us away from willfully sinning, for just taking sin. We want to study with diligence. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 34, Paul writes, awake to righteousness and sin not, for some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. Secondly, sin hardens the heart. See, callousness is going to set in when we allow our hearts to be hardened to the truth. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13. Third, sin causes separation from God. And this is the biggest one. Being separated from our Creator. Isaiah 59, verse 1 and 2 says, behold, the Lord's hand is not so short that it cannot save, nor his ear so dull that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. Thirdly, think about, where is sin? Where does it go? Is sin contained to a certain geographical area? Well, unlike the COVID-19, the sin is a soul virus. Like COVID-19, it's everywhere. It'll go everywhere. It will not discriminate. But sin is a disease of the soul. And since every person has a soul, every person of accountability, that is, every person who is mature, every person who knows right from wrong, spiritually, will be infected with sin. See, babies are not sinners. Children, young children are not sinners. They're not going to be held accountable when they just don't know any better. Children make childish mistakes. Jesus said to his disciples to let the little children come unto him, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then notice what Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. He writes, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. See, the devil's going to be searching us out. He has many ways in which he can find us, in which he can cause us to stumble. What is the cause of sin? Well, Satan deceives us to sin. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13 says, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. See, many years ago, Paul Harvey talked about how the Arctic hunter, the Eskimo, how he caught his prey, how he would kill a wolf. He would take a knife and he would put the knife into the snow and he would cover it in blood, and then it would freeze, and then he would cover it in more blood, and then it would freeze, and he would repeat the steps 3 or 4 times until there was a nice thick coat over that knife. And then the wolf would come in, and the wolf would start licking that knife. And as he kept licking that knife, he kept getting more and more of a craving for that blood, until he got down to that blade and he cut his tongue. But it didn't matter, because he was licking that blood that was already on there. Then eventually he was drinking its own blood. And he kept doing so until he bled out, until he lost too much blood and he perishes. That's how sin is to us. Satan finds different ways to put that blade out there for us where we can't resist. And then when it's too late, he's got us. There are 3 ways in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 16 that the devil uses, that he used on Eve in Genesis chapter 3. It says, do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Verse 16, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the vainglory or the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. See, we can see this happening to Eve in Genesis chapter 3 in the first 6 verses here. You know, Eve started out as good, and she told Satan what she could do and what she could not do in verses 2 and 3. Eat of the tree, or eat of the fruit of the tree. Anyone in that garden, God told Eve that her and Adam could eat of, but not of that one in the midst, that one of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says, if you do eat from that, you shall surely die. But Satan, or I should say, the serpent comes slithering in there, and he puts the seeds of doubt in her mind. See, was God withholding a blessing from her, not knowing between good and evil? She wanted that. She desired to be like God. See, because Satan lied to her because he knew that she desired that. So he said this, you shall not surely die, in verse 4. And notice in verse 5 of Genesis chapter 3, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened. See, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Did Eve want to be wise like God, knowing that? Well, it appears that way, and it appears Satan knew that. See, she was attempted to rationalize the sin to herself in 3 ways. First of all, number 1, the fruit was food and therefore appealing to her appetite. This was the lust of the flesh at work that we just read in 1 John chapter 2. Secondly, the fruit was tantalizing. This was the lust of the eyes at work. And then third, finally, the fruit was desirable to her eyes, to make her wise like God. See, and this was the pride of life at work. See, these 3 things are like that knife that we talked about, that the frozen blood that the Eskimo uses to get its prey, to get that hungry wolf to come in. The devil uses deception. He deceives us. So we fall into his traps. We're going to talk about the last two next week. We're going to talk about what happens to us if we do not seek the cure. If we do not go to God. We do not seek out the great physician. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at seeking out that cure. Because if we don't, what's going to happen to us? Well, what happens if we do not seek out a cure, a treatment, I should say, for COVID-19 if we get it? What happens if there's another disease that we have and we leave it alone? Pretty much, it's going to be the end of us. See, we can't do that when it comes to God. God gives us what we need. So we're going to look at what happens if we don't seek out the cure, and then we're going to look at what is the cure and what do we need to do in order to find that cure. We're also going to look at examples next week. An example from the Old Testament and an example from the New Testament on two men who were sick. And what did they do in order to be made well? See, if you want to be made well, what are you going to do? Any one of us who has a sickness, who has a disease, and there's a cure for us, we're going to do all we can. Even if there is not a cure physically, we're going to do all we can, aren't we? Well, what about our souls? Isn't our souls more important than anything? Yes, your soul is most precious to God. You were to die for God. That's how Jesus feels about you. He loves you that much that he faced death, that he faced all that agony, all that pain and agony on the cross, so you would have a cure for sin. We're going to talk about all that next week. Hopefully there was something that was said today. Today we just looked at what sin is, what sin does, the cause of it. But we could all be thankful that we have hope. We could all be thankful that we have something that is going to take care of that disease in our lives. I hope you have a wonderful day. I want you all to know that I miss seeing your faces. It was nice seeing your faces on Thursday night in our Bible study. And hopefully, if you're watching this and you haven't joined our Bible study on Zoom, we will let you know how to do that. We hope that you could have that opportunity to do that. And I'm praying for you all, praying for each other that we remain safe and healthy, praying that this ends soon so others do not have to face this dreadful disease that's out there, that they can get back to their normal way of living. But hopefully what we're facing today, it is going to slow us down a bit. It's going to cause us to want to be with family more, to study more, to give our lives to others more, to put others' needs before our own. You know, there's so many wonderful things also that this is showing. Like I talked about last week, it exposes us. But we could use it for the good. Have a great day. I love you all. Take care.